October 19th meeting of the Mobile City Planning Commission. I would like to take a moment to review our general operating procedures. Our meeting is divided into two sessions, the public hearing session and the deliberation session. In the public hearing session, an application or group application on the agenda is called. The applicant makes his or her presentation. Commission members ask questions, if any. Members of the public make their comments. Only 4 people may speak for an agenda item or project and 4 against. Each speaker is limited to 5 minutes, subject to questions by the commission. After 4 minutes, a loud beep will indicate 1 minute left to speak, and at this point, please summarize your comments. After all opposition speakers have finished, the applicant will be given time to respond. If you do intend to speak, please come to the podium, speak into the microphone, and give your name and address for the minutes. Please direct all comments to the commission only and not to the applicant or the audience, and please remember to speak directly into the microphone. On routine applications, the applicant may simply raise his or her hand if there are no objections to the staff recommendations. I will then announce that the applicant is in full agreement with those recommendations. If there are any questions, the applicant will be given an opportunity to respond. After hearing all applications, the commission will go into deliberation session. In the deliberation session, the commissioners discuss each application with input from the staff as necessary, but with no input from the audience. The commissioners then vote on each application, and the results of voting can be learned from the planning department. If some issues arise in the deliberation session that were not addressed in the public hearing, the chairman has the discretion either to allow additional comments pertaining to those issues in order to resolve them, or call for the application to be held over for discussion at a future meeting. Occasionally, 1 or more commission members may recuse themselves from discussing and voicing on a given application. A recusal does not necessarily mean the member is directly involved with the application or the applicant. Depending upon the circumstances, ethical rules may require a recusal when there is only the slightest appearance of a conflict of interest. If a regular member recuses, a supernumerary will vote in their stead unless both supernumeraries are already voting due to absences. The Planning Commission makes final decisions subject to appeal on subdivisions, planning approvals, and plan unit developments, PUDs. The Planning Commission only makes recommendation on zoning applications, with the City Council making the final decision. Please turn off or silence all cell phones at this time. Roll call. Myself, Mr. Thomas Doyle.
Here.
Mr. Taylor Atchison.
Here.
Ms. Keena Andrews.
Here.
Mr. Nick Omberger.
Here.
Mr. Don Hembry.
Here.
We have a quorum. We're going to begin with extensions. Item number 1, 254, 256, 260, 264 Dogwood Drive. This application is recommended for an extension.
Hello, my name is Emily Miller and my address is 26 Benedict Place. We are withdrawing our application.
Okay, application has been withdrawn.
Yes, sir.
All right. Item number 2, north side of Grelot Road, 125 east of Selby Phillips. It is recommended for a 1-year extension be approved. Are you in agreement? Thank you. Anyone here to speak for or against this? Thank you. Next group, holdovers. Item number 3, 3975 Demetropolis Road. This application is recommended for approval, subject to staff recommendations. Is the applicant present? Are you in agreement with staff recommendations? The applicant is present and in agreement. Is there anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Thank you. The record showing this session. New subdivision applications. Item number 4, 59 Oklahoma Drive. It's recommended for approval, subject to staff recommendations. Applicant is present and in agreement. Is there anyone else here to speak for? Anyone here to speak against? Thank you. Item number 5, 203 South Claiborne Street and 305 Civic Drive. This application is recommended for tentative approval. Applicant is present and is in agreement with staff recommendations. Is there anyone here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Thank you. Item number 6, 4658 Clearview Drive, recommended for tentative approval. Is the applicant present? Are you in agreement with staff recommendations? Applicant is present and in agreement. Is there anyone here to speak for this?
Good afternoon. My name is Bob Marion. I live at 8001 Domain Street, which is the road directly south of that property, as you can see on your drawing. There are 2 other people, at least that I know are here, that live on that street as well. I'm not here to speak against this as much as I'm here to ask, what does this mean to the neighbors? That piece of property is surrounded by subdivisions of single-family homes. And now what we find is that there are trailers moving into that piece of property, at least 3 at this point. And what we would like to know is the impact on our neighborhood. How is it zoned? What are the covenants for this new subdivision? But generally, other than not knowing that, I'm not here to speak against a subdivision. But I think the neighbors are concerned that this piece of property will and already has negatively impacted the property values in those neighborhoods.
Okay. Richard?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, the property in question is in the county. Therefore, there are no zoning regulations regarding use of the property. The county does not have zoning either. What the commission is considering today is, if you look at the detailed site plan, is simply a 2-lot subdivision. They indicate both lots as lot 1. One of the conditions is that they correct that and have a lot 1 and lot 2. But this is all that's actually before the commission today, and since it's in the county, we have no jurisdiction over what they do with it beyond that.
Okay. Unless the owner would like to speak to this, is there anyone else here to speak for or against it? All right, thank you. Item number 7, Forest Hill Subdivision, 4803, 05, 07, 11, 13, 19, and 21 Moffitt Road, recommended for tentative approval. Is the applicant present? Are you in agreement with staff recommendations? Applicant is present and in agreement. Is there anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Thank you. Item number 8, 990 Cody Road North. This application is recommended for tentative approval, subject to staff recommendations. The applicant present. Are you in agreement with staff recommendations? Applicant is present and in agreement. Is there anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Thank you. Item number 9, 5157 Roswell Road South. It's recommended for approval, subject to staff recommendations. Is the applicant present? Are you in agreement? Applicant is present and in agreement. Is there anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Thank you. Item number 10, 3531 and 3535 Lipscomb Landing. It's recommended for a holdover to the November 16th meeting with revisions due by October 23rd that probably will be granted. Is the applicant present? Are you in agreement with this? At that meeting, people will have the opportunity to speak for or against it. However, if you so choose to speak now, you have that right. Item number 11, south side of Ark Road. It's recommended for tentative approval, subject to staff recommendations. The applicant is present and in agreement. Is there anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Thank you. Item number 12, 10950 Airport Boulevard, Sierra Estate Subdivision. This item is recommended for tentative approval, subject to applicant is present and in agreement. Is there anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Okay. New plan unit development applications. Item number 13, 6576 Airport Boulevard. It is recommended for approval, subject to staff recommendations. The applicant present? Present. Are you in agreement with staff recommendation?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. My name is Doug Shepard. My company is MedQuest Associates. We're at 3480 Preston Ridge Road in Alpharetta, Georgia. We lease a business on Lot A of the application here. It's Mobile Open MRI. We've had a great deal of success at this location. We operate an MRI as well as other medical imaging at this location. And we can't serve our patients. We need more capacity. Currently, we're operating as early as 7 a.m. and we run all the way to the evenings, up to 8 o'clock evening appointments. We also offer Saturday appointments and Sunday afternoon. We'd like to offer our patients the ability to get an exam during weekday hours, and we'd like to add a second MRI. Fortunately, the building doesn't allow for that to occur right away, so we'd like to install a trailer on the side of the building. It'll be screened from view from Airport Road by the building itself. But our concern about is the condition number one, which is restricting the station of the mobile MRI for no more than 1 year. We've come to an agreement with our commercial neighbors, lots B and C, which agreed in spirit that we would limit that to a 1 year period. However, we would like to reserve the ability outside of this organization here to negotiate with our neighbors, to extend that if necessary, because our intention is to hire an architect, design for inside the building, putting an MRI. But if that were to delay beyond a year, we'd like to be able to go to our neighbors and negotiate an extension. We also, if we had an MRI were to fail, we'd like the opportunity to bring that back, subject to commercial association approval, just temporarily. But again, the 1 year limit is a hardship for us. We would request that that be waived.
Okay.
What could you live with time-wise? Say it's a temporary situation, what would you be comfortable with if the commission wanted to go beyond a year?
Would you be willing to give us 2 years, and then in emergency situations or in the future, perhaps no more than 10 weeks for an emergency basis?
The 2 years, I don't think would be a problem, and beyond that, they could simply just come back to the commission for another approval, leaving it open for any point in the future. I don't know if that's something the commission would like to do.
We could accept that.
Okay. Any questions by commissioners?
Richard, just address, if you would, the city code that prohibits the use. I guess this would be considered a modular type office building. How does the city code look at that?
It really doesn't prohibit a modular office type, but since this is a PUD and the remainder of the PUD is site-built structure, to maintain that character is one of the reasons that limitation, time limitation, was recommended. Also, the application stated temporary, and there was no time frame given for that temporary. Well, and it's a trailer. Building code doesn't really apply to a trailer. You know, they have a state certification on them.
Any other questions by commissioners? All right, thank you, sir. Is there anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? We'll take it up in deliberation. New group applications, 6401 Overlook Road, subdivision and zoning, both recommended for tentative approval. Is the applicant present? Are you in agreement with staff recommendations? Yes. Applicant is present and in agreement with staff recommendations. Is there anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Thank you. Item number 15, 2001 Spring Hill Avenue and 137, 39, and 49 Tuscaloosa Street, subdivision and PUD application. It is, both parts are recommended for approval subject to staff recommendation. Is the applicant present? Are you in agreement with staff recommendations? Applicant is present and in agreement. Is there anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against?
George Brew, 1956 College Court.
What's your name?
Pardon?
What's your name?
George Brew, B-R-U.
Okay, sir.
And I think this is the property that backs right up to my property, which I'm to the south of that. And what I'm concerned about is privacy, and we use that area for astronomy. We take some of the kids and neighborhood, we do stargazing. And I was wondering if the possibility of having maybe an 8-foot privacy fence along that border and say an evergreen blocker of sorts.
So you're,
Can you repeat your address?
1956 College Court.
College Court.
Mr. Bridger, what you're asking is for a privacy fence?
8-foot privacy fence,
As well
as well as a
evergreen
evergreen
barrier.
border. Yeah.
Is there nothing in that area, in that location now to screen the commercial from the residential areas?
No, not that I know of. Well, I have a fence, you know, a chain link fence at the back.
Richard, what are we requiring at the moment? A standard 6 foot between the residential and the parking lot?
Yeah, the minimum buffer that's required is either a 6-foot privacy fence or a 10-foot buffer planting strip that's planted densely enough such that light, debris does not filter through.
But we could ask that they provide both of those? Or
You could ask that they provide.
And the 10-foot?
Yes, because it is a PUD.
Yeah, the other concern I had is that it opens my property and my neighbors, you know, to intrusion, I guess you could say, without a higher fence.
Could we get you to show us on the map? Bert, can you pull up? Show us where you're talking about so we can have an idea about the area.
I'm sorry, I don't have the laser with us, but it is, okay, Bert's gonna fix it for me. There we go.
So he lives here.
Yeah, where the pointer is College Court, and he lives on that, and there is, I believe that's the property he's referring to right there, where they do the observation, the astronomy and all of that. Is that correct?
Yeah, I have a half acre behind my property, my house, and then my property is on College Court. But behind my house, there's a half acre that I have, that I bought. And
Yes.
it backs right up to the,
A little more visible right here.
yeah, I think that's it there.
Yeah. Or, let's see. Yeah, right here.
You see right there, there's an open area.
Yeah, that's probably my half acre.
Well, if we're talking about black and light, that parking lot's going to be required by the city code to not emit light pollution onto your land with a pretty detailed formula for allowed foot candles. And I don't think a 6 to 8 foot fence, the difference is going to change the light that comes onto that property right there. Richard, where's that medical business parking now?
The office is right here. They have parking, so a little bit here in the rear and then along the side here. It's not really adequate, nor does it meet full standards. And I think they actually also, and probably should have been included, an older PUD with the Rite Aid site have use of some of the parking along this property line as well.
Oh, yeah. And I forgot, I'm sure they'll be putting, they'll put up lights. There'll be lots of lights in the parking garage.
Sir?
I'm sure there'll be lots of lights in the parking area.
The zoning ordinance has a requirement that for parking lots like this will be, the lighting level within the parking lot cannot exceed a certain amount, and where it abuts a residential property, it cannot be greater than 0.2 foot candles at the property line,
Yes,
which is not much at all.
yes.
Well, I think the commission could also consider, requiring dark sky compliant full cutoff fixtures as well, which would help with light pollution.
Go back to the fence for a minute, because, this is, the proposed site is already zoned to B1.
Yes,
So we're
sir.
not doing a zoning change.
Correct.
And that adjoins resident R1. So there's
Yes.
already a requirement for a buffer.
I don't know that the actual commercial use ever occupied the structure to then bring it into compliance with the B1. That zoning occurred a number of years ago. And one of the things also related to this application that I think we would like the developer, property owner, whomever to address. At that time, it was pointed out that the structure on the property was on the National Register of Historic Places. And if that is still the case, there will be some things that they would have to do through, I believe it's the Park Services, to demolish that residence.
Will the parking lot lighting be on all night?
That was not part of the application. We don't really know if it would be on all night, parking lot lighting.
Richard, I guess what we're required to be.
I'm sorry?
Wouldn't it be required to be if you have a
Only
parking-
if the business is open.
Okay.
If the business is not open after dark, then the lighting they would not have to really have the lighting. But if they are, wintertime, it gets dark very early.
Right.
So if they're open past dark during the winter months, they would have to have lighting, and it would then not have to be on when the business closed.
Can we incorporate any language regarding that parking lot lighting just to help, I guess, preserve a buffer, in terms of light when the business is not in operation, or?
And since it's a PUD, and Doug, correct me if I'm wrong, you have a lot of latitude in the types of conditions that can be imposed, similar to what was done.
So was she asking an additional landscape buffer?
Oh, no, I think she's talking about requirements with the lights, like either Mr. Doyle said for the dark sky, or to require them to be turned off when the business is not open, things like that, which is, as I was going to say, very similar to what y'all did with the planning approval PUD for St. Luke's, Mobile Christian, and some of the others. So that's well within your purview for a planning approval or planned unit development.
I'm still unclear as to why those items are not just part of the staff recommendations for the PUD. I mean, that's always been sort of what we've seen for PUDs, that with the zoning, with being business going to residential.
Mr. Hembry, I'm not sure I can address that at the moment. I know as far as the structure in the National Register, that was something that I just remembered recently, so that would not have been a part of the report. The others are things all I can say is staff overlooked. Okay.
But we can add, we can add that in there as far as our standard normal procedure.
Yes, sir.
That we require.
Yes, sir.
And of course we have to get the applicant to make sure that
they're aware
of those requirements. So,
Richard, my question is this. Hopefully this summarizes it all up, but by the standard notes, they're going to be required to either have a 6-foot fence or a 10-foot buffered. And so really the only question before us, I guess the gentleman at the podium is asking for an additional 2 feet above and beyond what the standard conditions would require.
That, or if you wanted to require both the 6-foot and the 10-foot.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Or we could do the 8-foot and the 10-foot vegetative.
Yeah, that's what
Richard, do we know currently what's there now? Because I'm sure there's a fence there now, based on the parking lot for the drugstore and the office building, the medical office building. There is a fence. Do we know?
Yeah, there's a 6-foot fence along where the Rite Aid used to be, all along that, next to the house that they're going to remove.
Right.
There is a fence there, but there's on the backside, which borders my property, there's no privacy fence. Right. There are a lot of trees that are there now existing, but no fence, other than the chain link fence.
Thank you. Well, you do already have the photometric plan on the requirement, so we're good on that. It's just the buffer fence screening.
And that's something that we put in as a rule, but it's also something that would automatically be required when they redevelop the site.
Okay.
Any other questions by commissioners? Thank you, sir.
Thank you all for your time.
Anyone else here to speak against?
Good afternoon. My name is Al Caraglino. I live at 138 Florence Place. My property is adjacent to the proposed parking lot area. I had submitted my questions to the council before I got up here, so. But if you look on the illustrations, what it shows is there's currently a street that they're going to have to vacate, or the city would have to vacate, between the 137 property and the doctor's office. It's not really shown there, but there is a street there that is used quite a bit during the day. School buses, delivery trucks, what have you. It's the only way you can come out to Spring Hill Avenue from Tuscaloosa to get to the light, so you can make a left-hand turn or go across Spring Hill. If you try to go straight out to Tuscaloosa, the only thing you can do there is make a right turn, because there's no way to get across Spring Hill, and especially when the high traffic, there's just no way to get into it. Now, in your proposal, I noticed that it said that they were going to tear up that street and incorporate that into the part of the parking lot with that doctor's office. And like I said, I've lived on Florence Place there for over 30 years, and we use that street ourselves a lot of times to come into my property. Like I said, it butts right up against my garage, and from what I can tell from the drawings is that it would actually be no room for any kind of a buffer. Plus the other problem I've been looking at was the drainage problem, because the property goes down there. It used to be an old creek bed through there, and that's going to present a real problem for the water draining back onto our property. Another area that we've had a problem with is with the Rite Aid drugstore. We worked with them when they first came in, and we had a lot of homeless people just hung out there. And people coming over to dig in the dumpsters, and people coming to just throw trash. Parking lots invariably will draw people to some reason to dump their trash and old furniture or whatever out there, even household garbage. And it has caused us a real problem. On a couple of occasions where I've seen somebody doing it and I say something to them, I've been threatened with bodily harm. I was a special forces person, so I'm not really worried about that. Also, a security risk. They're showing that garage that they butt up against, that is a garage apartment, has been there since the property was there. I have a young lady and a young child living there, and we've already had the police doing a close patrol in that area because of when the lights are out in that parking lot, it's extremely dark back there, and we get all kinds of weird goings on as far as traffic, boombox cars, hollering, screaming, just, you know, people being rowdy. Biggest thing I'm really concerned about, though, like I said, besides the flooding and the weird people, would be the fact that the property values on Florence Place would be affected due to this parking lot behind our property. So for these reasons, I'm really objecting to the whole program, and whatever I can do to implement not doing it, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Any questions by the commissioners or comments?
Question for city traffic. You didn't mention that this is a city thoroughfare, but is it legally a city thoroughfare?
No.
No. Okay.
I was going to, Mary Beth, if you would, talk about, because I just reread the traffic comments and a little confusing to me about removal of asphalt, things like that.
Yeah.
That property that is the former Rite Aid is not part of this application.
Correct. Okay, so based on the information that I got, the application to review, the strip that connects to Tuscaloosa was part of the Rite Aid property. What the medical facility is proposing to do is remove the asphalt on their property between the building and their property line, which basically is going to tear out half of that driveway that accesses the traffic signal on Stanton Road. The issue that we have is that it's going to severely impact the traffic that uses it now. If it's the alley or assumed alley, if it's people on Tuscaloosa, I don't have that information, but we are concerned about that driveway being modified in that way to keep the signal functioning as it does right now. Our knowledge has that approach for the traffic signal going in about 1990 when the KMB drugstore moved in. Before then, it was a T intersection. So our comments basically say it needs to return back to a T intersection. Traffic on Spring Hill Avenue can enter the Rite Aid property at that exit or at that driveway, but people on the property, on the Rite Aid property, would no longer be able to exit onto Spring Hill Avenue. So we wouldn't have conflicting movements in a narrowed driveway.
So your recommendation is that the people coming out of this parking lot, turning left or going to Stanton, that light's going to be removed?
Yes.
Okay. Well, with that being the case, I'm not sure we can proceed with this. And you're the applicant? Come up, please. I represented these pain doctors back 10, 15 years ago and did a PUD with the Rite Aid people. Mm-hmm. And I don't think legally we can proceed with this without the Rite Aid owner, who was a gentleman from Louisiana at that point in time, being a part of this, because by removing that light, we are affecting the access and parking with his property. That road that the gentleman says is a city right-of-way to Tuscaloosa. It's not. It's part of the Rite Aid parcel that goes to Tuscaloosa, and people have been using it to get to that light as a city street, but it's private property. So the public has no right to that access. And the light was originally just for the guest of these two, the doctor's office and the Rite Aid. But I'll let this gentleman, I guess the developer, explain to us why Rite Aid's not in this, or the Rite Aid owner, and we'll go from there.
Thank you. Sorry, I've been trying to get up here to answer a lot of these questions that have been flying around. First off,
name and
yes. My name's Larry Smith. I'm the civil engineer for the project. My address is 1 South School Street in Fairhope, Alabama. And I don't know where to start. First, I'll go with...
First, the threshold question is, can we proceed without the Rite Aid owner being here? And explain to us how we can. Because there's an existing PUD with...
Yes, there is an existing PUD, and we were aware of that when we went to the planning department. There are existing agreements between that property owner and this one that state that if any modifications are made to access it, the agreement is null and void. We provided those documents to the city for their review. I also spoke with traffic. I believe Mary Beth was out whenever it went through, and they weren't really sure why Rite Aid was ever given a signal to begin with. Whenever I talked with them, and they were saying they'd be able to utilize that for more stacking. At the time, they didn't really have an issue with that signal coming out. As far as the access road, it is private. You are correct there. There is easement, and we're not doing anything within that easement that they have, which is that little strip. The problem is there's a large live oak in the middle of that easement that they have, but their easement is not, we're not doing anything to the easement itself that Rite Aid has on our property. They don't have an easement on our property, they have that strip. As you can see, there's just not a driveway within that strip. And so we provided that agreement that was between Rite Aid and the pain doctors that used to be in that facility. The problem is, as you know, that building is now unoccupied, and we cannot get in touch with, we can't seem to be able to get them to do anything with that property. The same issue that the gentleman was having as it running downhill. We're having the same issue trying to get them to come into a PUD. It'd be a lot easier for us if we could maintain a relationship with them, because we would like to have access between the parcels. We are wanting to actually connect over to that same drive that this gentleman was using, but we can't bring a PUD before you without their agreement to it. And so when we talked to the city staff, the easiest way was for us to present our own PUD doing what we needed on our two properties, which would pull us out of the agreement that we had with the other with the old PUD. And like I said, I provided those documents over to the city for their review, and I thought he was passing it on to the city attorney, but I guess not.
No. The development of the medical office is going to have a negative impact on the parking and the access rights of the Rite Aid parcel. Is that correct? It's going to change them.
Yeah, by doing a PUD, we have to pull out all cross-access between our properties.
And I don't remember what the purpose of the PUD was that I did for the pain doctors years ago. I think it had something to do with that porte-cochere they built, maybe, I'm not sure. Does anybody on staff know what that PUD, if it was for cross-access to, I mean, if that PUD had anything to do with Rite Aid's right to use that driveway at the light, we've got to have them in this PUD, because we're taking away their property rights. And I know they were notified of this as a budding property owner, but if they're part of a PUD, they have more legal rights than just being notified.
And we are fine with leaving the access the way it is. We only showed it coming out because that's what the city asked us to do. Sure. Yeah. And so I mean, it's just a small sliver of our property. We're not utilizing it for anything, but the city told us we needed to cut all cross-access between us. And quite honestly, the cross-access element's already gone. There's already a planter between where our parking on the north side, if you can scroll up on that slide so I can see the top of the existing building.
Maybe.
Or zoom out. That's all right. You can see there's where it says proposed parking, that's actually existing parking. You can see a vertical element going up on the, over by where the light is, where it says Avenue for Spring Hill Avenue. You got the red pointer, or you want me to control the pointer?
I don't know that it'll work that far away. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's not wanting to work. Here we go. Right there, there's a planting strip. You can see that line, and there's a fence within that planting strip. So we're already cut off from the light. We were just showing what was asked of us, but we'll be willing to not do that and leave the light functioning as it is for whoever comes into this Rite Aid property. Like I said, we were just trying to do what was being asked of us by the traffic department. So I think that was one of the big questions, was that light there. The next question that, or where we started, was the light pollution will obviously meet the lighting requirements that we have abutting residential. We are showing on the current site plan that was provided a 6-foot fence on all properties that abutted the residential property. And that might have been why they left the buffer note out of there, because we were already showing that buffer within our plans. As you can see, we've got a strip between our parking and the property line, and that's also going to be landscaped. And then I don't know if anybody's familiar with the property, but there were some very large diameter specimen trees, and we're preserving those trees. And one of them, or several of them, are exactly where the gentleman who does the astronomy, you can see where the detention pond is. We moved it around those trees to be able to protect those trees and keep those there to act also as a buffer. So there will not be site lighting back there in that particular area. And we're also, like I said, saving. I mean, you can see half my parking lot looks green from the trees that we're trying to save and work around. And we'll, like I said, we provided a landscape plan that shows the buffers that are required as well. Were there any other comments that were brought up that I need to address? I'm trying to remember them all.
Mr. Anderson, would altering item number 3 on the subdivision, would that address the concerns of what we're worried about with the Rite Aid property, where it talks about the curb cut?
No, sir. My concern is the access to Spring Hill Avenue. And Bert did find in the file a copy of the PUD from 06 or 06, where it is for joint cross access and parking, because it has the parking spaces assigned to each of these 2 lots between Rite Aid and the Pain Doctors. I have no problem with this project, but if your decision results in the cross access, cross parking, or denial or closure of that traffic light, then we're going to have to get that owner involved in this PUD. Because pursuant to this 06 PUD, he has those legal rights.
But if
and I know that was not your original intention to block him off.
And like I said, we'll be glad not to close off that light.
So that would be...
But then that goes back to what traffic says we need to close it, so where are we?
Well, from my recollection, the PUD even back in 06 has shown the parking on the north side of the property was always cut off, that it wasn't, the planters were there in 06 when that PUD was put in. I think the cross access is more on the south side of the building, where the Rite Aid folks have to actually enter the property for the medical office because of the position of the oak tree. So I don't know how you, there's still some cross access in there down to the south. It's there constructed. How do we work that out, I guess? Well, that's where the PUD comes in my opinion. But
I would think in essence, that the access here has to remain open and undisturbed. That then allows for the Rite Aid property to maintain the access, full access that it has. That this would not then cause you to say the traffic light has to be removed.
Correct.
So everything would, as far as the Rite Aid property is concerned, remain as was approved in '06.
Or we could hold it over, that Rite Aid property is for sale, it's represented by Sterling Properties, it has an office here in Mobile. And, you know, we could easily, or this gentleman and his client could easily contact them and get them down here and let's have everybody at the table to make sure that we're not denying that property, property rights.
You know, I live in that area, so I know that Rite Aid, it only has a driveway. If I'm looking at Spring Hill Avenue, there's a driveway west, and then the only other, I guess, driveway to that property is where the light is.
Mm-hmm.
So if we cut off one, how will they get out? And even if we cut off Tuscaloosa Street, it's going to be a problem with people coming in and out of that particular driveway.
I'm not sure
So
how we can,
it's a challenge.
it's my understanding that Tuscaloosa Street is Rite Aid's property. So we cannot cut that off. See, there's a gap between these two
Right.
parcels.
Right, that's the
So
driveway.
we cannot, this decision cannot deny Rite Aid their access to Tuscaloosa.
And again, we're not proposing any work
Sure.
within that strip.
I'm not saying you are, but the staff report indicated, it was kind of confusing in that
Yeah,
regard.
well, the problem is the pavement, as he's, I think, shading in for you there, the pavement
Oh, okay.
actually comes off of their property, and they're actually accessing through our property without an easement. And that's the issue.
In the back, the back of it.
On the backside, yes.
And that pavement that you're referring to is in fact on your property.
Correct.
But it was part of that approved PUD.
And we understand, we tried to bring them to the table to do this modification, and we couldn't get anything out of them. And so this is what we were told by the staff we should do to proceed, because we're with contractors waiting on go to do the internal remodel. And
This is a question for the staff and Mr. Anderson. Would it be appropriate, or could it be appropriate for them to provide an easement across that corner that allowed that pavement to remain in place? Because I think the big challenge is, I guess, because there's a large oak tree. If the oak tree wasn't there, the road could exist within the right-of-way that it's there. But since the oak tree's there, nobody would obviously want to move the oak tree. Would that be a way forward if they provided an easement across that corner that allowed that pavement to remain in place? Then it wouldn't change anything for the Rite Aid property.
I mean, like I said, we're fine with it. Our goal wasn't to cut their access off. We were trying to move forward with how we were explained. We needed to move forward without having Rite Aid at
I think
the
the
table.
challenge is you've got an encroachment into your property that's allowed to be there by way of a PUD. So either they have to be here to speak for themselves, or we have to find some other way to accommodate it.
And I haven't. The architect and the pulmonary associates, I told them they needed to resolve all of that.
We're going to have to hold this over, and since the owner of the Rite Aid has a local representative at Sterling Properties, let his client get in touch with them and make sure they know what's going on, and we're not denying them any rights. I hate to do that, but that's just, we got to.
Well, I understand, but just one more obvious point. They were also notified of this hearing, just like all the other property owners that were here.
Sounds to me like the solution, once we get the other property owners involved in it, would be just to allow the cross-access and protect the easement, well, the lack of easement that's granted by the previous PUD.
And what is our path forward if they don't still come, as we've reached out to them already?
Let me, Do we have in the file those documents?
I've got the easement documents. I emailed to Logan Anderson when we first started talking about the project. And he was
I'm
going
gonna
to
need to
share
review
them.
those and study this more to see what, if we're gonna take away that light, we're gonna have to get Rite Aid's approval. And maybe not bring them in the PUD, but have them agree to it.
Does the city want the light gone? Because again, I care less if it stays. It's not,
That's a
we don't
loaded
have access to it right now anyway. It's nothing, it doesn't hurt or help us.
No, I mean, if
Yeah,
this
that's-
project hadn't
if
come
we don't have
forward,
access
we
to
wouldn't,
property,
we had no plan changes for this,
No.
for this light until something off-site
Just
kind
a
of
small
set it off.
little
So.
section.
How long would need to hold it over? One meeting or 2 meetings?
Definitely at least November 16, because if it requires additional inclusion for the Rite Aid property, there's going to be additional notifications required. If it can be done, if Mr. Anderson finds a way it can be done some other way, yay, but on this, to be safe for additional notification requirements. So it'd be 11/16.
And as I'm walking away here and I have to call my clients, can I get an explanation of exactly what we're seeking with the Rite Aid? So I can tell them.
It'll be in the letter of decision.
Okay.
Blame it on the lawyer.
Blame it on the lawyer.
Well, that's what I was going to do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Please come to the podium, ma'am.
I am against this application.
Could you please tell us your name and address?
I'm Dorothy I. Wells at 134 Florence Place, Mobile, Alabama, 36607.
Thank you.
I live on 134 Florence Place. On the beautiful street that is canopied by many live giant oak trees. It's beautiful, it's picturesque, and I'd like for it to stay that way. Thank you, Planning Commission, for protecting us and our residents of Florence Place over the years, and for 2 reasons. In 1977, Florence Place was a 2-way congested street. By petition, Florence Place became a 1-way street. Secondly, 1992, August 6th, 137 Tuscaloosa Street went before the Planning Commission and was unsuccessful in their attempt to rezone from a B1 to a B2 neighborhood buffer district. I spoke at that time concerning my object and opposition, and when 137 Tuscaloosa Street requested to become a reception hall, they also could have turned it into a bar, a gas station, and other unwelcoming items. Today, I come to you at this public hearing emphatically opposing the application by PAM, Pulmonary Association of Mobile, for off-site parking lot which would border my own backyard. My backyard at 134 Florence Place abuts the backyard of 137 Tuscaloosa Street. Also, I want to emphasize that my property is on a slant. The higher part at the backyard portion of my property borders 137 Tuscaloosa property. During heavy rains, Water drains from my backyard down my driveway to Florence Place. If 137 Tuscaloosa Street becomes a concrete paved parking lot, trees are removed and storm water runoff would be very severe, flooding my property. Would you want that for yourself? Of course not, and I don't want it either. My home would be depreciated in value. One's home is one's most greatest investment and assets. Moreover, there would be traffic, there would be noise from vehicles, motors, doors opening and closing, people talking to each other, talking on cell phones. And I work full-time at night as a med tech at a local hospital. I sleep during the day. The noise would interfere with my needed sleep. In addition, I would be concerned about the privacy and safety. And what about the dumpster? It's right there at my property. And dumpsters can create a health, safety, and sanitary issues by attracting unwanted individuals, critters, and rodents. And I've been made aware of that PAM, Pulmonary Associates of Mobile, purchased 137 Tuscaloosa for $130,000 on January 30th, 2017. PAM, Pulmonary Associates of Mobile, purchased 2001 Spring Hill Avenue, as well as 139 and 141 Tuscaloosa Street in July 18, 2017 for $850,000. Why would PAM purchase all this property without the approval of this planning commission? I am indeed certain that if members of the Mobile Planning Commission were me, they would also oppose this application. PAM, Pulmonary Associates of Mobile. In summary, please protect the home values and residents of Florence Place, as you have done in the past. And thank you for hearing my voice today.
Thank you, ma'am. Any questions by commissioners? Okay, thank you, ma'am.
I just wanted to point out, we have taken off-site runoff into account with our drainage design. We actually are putting an inlet back there to help carry that runoff over to Tuscaloosa Street. So we have looked at that. And the dumpster's on the other end of the detention pond. And we too love the trees, and that's why we tried our hardest to work around all of those trees. I hate cutting down live oaks myself, so thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think we can take one more against. If you have not already spoken. You have already spoken, sir.
I wanted to say one thing about the red light. I mean, it isn't against anything, but that red light on that little alley, there's no light on Tuscaloosa Street, so people try to turn left on Spring Hill Avenue, it's almost a nightmare, so without that light, it would be an accident waiting to happen.
Okay, thank you, sir. We'll take up this issue in deliberation. Item number 16, 451 and 457 Dauphin Island Parkway, 6567 Antoine Street and 1968 Duncan Street. This application is recommended, all parts are recommended for holdover until November 16th meeting. Is the applicant present? Are you in agreement with this? You have an opportunity to speak if you so choose.
I'm Dennis McLeod. I live at 1420 Regency Oaks Drive West here in Mobile. I am the property owner of the properties listed on item 16. I also own the company at 16A Coast Safe and Lock Company. We've been at that same location there for 45 years. And I brought my agent with me.
My name is Tim Spafford. I live at 1263 Lake Circle West. I'm with Architecture and Design and have been assisting Mr. McLeod on the various applications that have been submitted. And we'd like to discuss the project and the staff recommendations. I do have a drawing for the Planning Commission members if somebody can hand it out. I brought 12 copies. There's not enough for everybody, but there's enough for the Planning Commission members. Just a brief history on how we got to today. Mr. McLeod, like he said, he's been at that location for 45 years, Coast Safe and Lock. Now they have acquired the various properties, 451 DIP, the two properties on Antoine Street and the property on Duncan Street over the years as the business grew and expanded their services. So he's been in the neighborhood quite a while. I'd also like to pass around, he's got a photo book of the improvements that have been made the last few years. And we just have one copy of this, but y'all can kind of thumb through it and then pass it along as we talk. It's not a, it's got some photographs in it. Over the years, and it's in the staff report, he has purchased the property, like I said, as his business grew. And then the corner property on 451 DIP, that building had termite damage and was not salvageable. So he got a permit and had that building demolished in 2015. And then the remaining buildings, there's actually 3 buildings that are all right next to one another, built over time and just the situation that he was handed. But 451 actually had 2 buildings. There was a veterinary clinic on the corner, and then the remaining building that he has occupied for his retail area. That building, if you look in the pictures, he also renovated that building, and previously it had a second floor. They had an accounting department for a previous business up on the second floor. It didn't have proper exiting or anything, and it was also dilapidated. So he renovated the front of that building to take the second floor off and extend the roof and then tie the 2 buildings together. And there's a photo in there of the building as is, but he's put a lot of money into his building and his business. After he had renovated the building, the parking along DIP has been there ever since the business has been there, but the parking is cracked, uneven. There's a 4-inch elevation change at one point, and he wanted to get a permit to repave that area to provide safe parking for his customers. And that's when the letters started coming from the city about, yes.
You have 5 minutes, but we have 1 minute left.
Okay.
Unless the chairman would like to provide your time.
And then we have 10 minutes?
That may I just keep going.
Can I request that we combine our time?
Yes, sir. Just keep going.
Okay. All right. So we submitted the applications to re-subdivide the property into one piece. And there's a residential R1, there's a B1 and a B3. And then we also submitted, this is after consultation with the city Urban Development Department. We also were requesting the rezoning, and then we did the PUD application, and the drawing that was passed out is the drawing that we submitted with the PUD application with one modification. The clouded area on the drawing lists the improvements that the owner is planning to make with the PUD. And they're in the notes and everything of the drawing, but I just wanted to make it easier to read. But he is planning on doing new pavement for customer parking along DIP. And it would include 2 handicap parking spaces. Currently, there are none. New parking area for longer vehicles on the corner property of DIP and Antoine Street. Right now, if somebody has a crew cab truck with a long bed, they kind of stick out into Dolphin Island Parkway when they park at the front of his building. So he wanted to make it safer in that regard. There's some privacy fence that it does not exist between his property and the residential property. He wanted to fill that in. And then when we repave the area along DIP, we would put in a new sidewalk walkway. And then we do have some understory trees we would add to the parking spaces added on the entrance from Antoine Street. As far as the staff recommendations, they're asking for a 25-foot radius dedication on the corner of Antoine Street and DIP. Right now, that property comes to a corner. They're also asking for an additional 5 feet of property to be given to the city along Antoine Street. And that would create a hardship for the owner because the site is tight for his business activities, and giving up additional 5 feet of his property along that side would negate any kind of parking maneuvering on the site where the building was torn down. The staff recommendation for, let's see, they also recommended full compliance with the landscaping and tree ordinance. Usually when you have an existing building on just the typical city project, you have to add on to the building before the landscape provisions kick in. And we were looking at this as a similar situation. We're not adding on to the buildings. We actually took away one of the dilapidated buildings. So we would ask for relief on that because, once again, that takes away more of his working and storage yard. On the one curb cut on each street, currently he has a curb cut and a gate entrance from DIP and Antoine Street for employee entrances for his trucks and employee parking. And then we have the on-street parking along DIP, and we want to add parking for the customer long vehicles from Antoine. So we would really need the curb cuts that are shown on the site plan. But all of them are existing now. They would be the public parking areas along. Okay, I didn't know there was a time limit before I started. I maybe could have condensed some of the early information. Okay. And we submitted a sidewalk waiver for Antoine Street beyond the new parking area because there's only 5 feet approximately between the curb and the fence, and you need about 9 feet to put in a proper city standard sidewalk. And that's it, if you have any questions.
Any questions by commissioners?
Mr. Spafford, I think what you're doing there looks great. I mean, I think it's definitely an improvement to the area, no question about that, but I think there's a lot of details here that are going to have to be worked out with staff. It's more than we as a commission, I think, can take on and try to address today.
Yeah.
So I think you need to get back up with staff and work out the details and then present it to us again at our, either the next meeting or the 11/16 meeting to get all the details worked out.
Well, I'm not sure how that process works. When the staff recommends we do something and we don't want to do it, do we have another meeting? I mean, how do we convince you to revise your staff recommendations?
Well, staff stands by the recommendations that we provided. The dedications, both at the intersection and for Anton, are standard because they are both substandard. As far as the compliance with landscaping and trees, while on a single building site, that what Mr. Spafford may be accurate, but this is a PUD involving not only the commercial property, but 2 residential properties that they are expanding on and having to go to the Board of Adjustment for use variances because they are not included in the rezoning. I'm not sure that there are many of the staff recommendations or conditions recommended that staff would feel comfortable acquiescing on without some direction from the commission. They are all pretty much a standard, typical recommendation for any type of development similar or close to this proposal.
Yeah, I didn't see anything that was out of line. I mean, it's just all standard stuff that we're used to seeing, so.
Yeah. Well, and quite a bit of the work has occurred without any approvals or permits as well. So that's contributed to the complexity of this issue.
Any other questions by commissioners?
This is not a question, more so just an observation. I know it's been this way forever, but the front parking that abuts Dauphin Island Parkway, it looks to encroach onto the state's right-of-way for for Dauphin Island Parkway. So I would just, that would be a permitting issue with the Alabama Department of Transportation. So I don't know if you've reached out to them and had any conversations, but I certainly would recommend that you do because, I could see a scenario where you got out there and maybe got started working, and then they would shut you down for that work that encroaches.
Yeah. We've had I've had several conversations with the highway department.
Okay.
And the staff did recommend that we speak with them previously. And the state is concerned about DIP curb to curb. Beyond the curb, they said, as long as you get it permitted by the city and send us a copy of what you're doing and you don't modify the street curb to curb, they're okay with it. Now, the man, had some caveats about getting the permit and getting the drawings and letting them see what we're doing, but in general, he was okay with it.
I think just for staff, I think it would be appropriate for us to reach out to staff to reach out to AlDOT and make sure that they were comfortable with that traffic backing out into right of way.
Yes, sir, we would do that. And I believe in one of our previous meetings, Jesse Yawn in your department indicated the need for a non-utility right-of-way use agreement, since we'd be maneuvering in the right-of-way. Does that sound familiar?
Would you say that again, please?
I said it fast. A non-utility right-of-way use agreement for the maneuvering
okay.
in the right-of-way.
Yeah,
that was something that had gotten brought up at that point too. So,
That's in here. I mean, with
yeah, it's not a detail that necessarily is detailed in these notes,
Right.
but something that has been brought up.
Yeah, your site plan just has a lot of built-in complication to it. I mean, it really does. Parking on the right-of-way, not being able to accommodate sidewalks. I mean, I understand it's been there forever, and I think the group wants to try to accommodate you, but it's got a lot of built-in obstacles with it from a regulatory standpoint. So
I did call the police department and ask them, did they have any recorded accidents at this location because of the parking backing out into the street, which I know is not something that would get approved on a new project. And the local office did not have any records, but they said the state keeps the official records. But anyway, I didn't pursue that any further, but Mr. McLeod said he'd been there 40 years and hadn't known of any traffic accidents. What he did have was, with the uneven pavement out there, a customer came by, an elderly lady, and when she was leaving, she tripped on the pavement and fell down and broke her teeth. And she didn't sue him, but she could have. Sure. And the next one, if you don't fix it, then you're being neglectful, and lawyers would love that. I mean, you got some buddies that would go. So,
Richard, real quick, what triggered this application? I mean, can they not repair their parking lot without making this PUD and rezoning application?
According to Mr. McLeod, when he renovated the building, and then the contractor went to get a permit to repave out front, and that's when all the deficiencies with the history of the project got going, where we're trying to resolve.
Can y'all clear that up for me? I mean, you have an existing structure that was renovated, and then they went to repair the parking lot, and then were triggered to apply for this?
Well, part of it was initially the permit to demolish the building at the corner of Antoine and Dauphin Island Parkway was not attached to the correct property. So when staff looked at whether or not they had a demolition permit, it appeared that they did not, but then that was resolved. But then as part of that, they started to park on the footprint of the previous building, which is an unimproved surface, so it would have to be brought into compliance. And then the issue of doing work in front of the building with the existing parking spaces that partially are in the right-of-way became a concern. And then we also looked at the aerial photographs and saw that the aggregate parking that they have on the back part had extended onto the back of a single-family residence property that he owns. And then he had started using an adjacent property that was not zoned commercially, even though it was an existing non-conforming commercial property, and did cross-access across that as well. So it was a whole series of things that got discovered based on, an item or two to do an inspection for a final CO for the building that he did renovate.
The two residential properties that Mr. McLeod purchased, those were, he uses the back side of those lots for employee parking. And he's also put a substantial investment into those houses, and he rents them out. Now, one of the tenants was an employee, and then I don't know what the other one was, but he's also put money into those houses, which is, good for the neighborhood. It's an older neighborhood. So I think he's been a good member of the neighborhood as far as contributing and investing in the neighborhood.
Yeah, we don't doubt that, but we do need to find a way to get in compliance with the current codes that we have to live by.
Yeah. As far as the parking in front of his building along DIP, that's a non-starter. He doesn't want to give that up. I mean, that's his customer parking. It's been that way for 45 years, and
is that apron parking pretty typical down DIP?
I'm sorry, say that again?
There's a question for staff.
There is some in some areas. It's not continuous. So I would say it's sporadic. I don't know that there's any that encroaches as much into the Dauphin Island Parkway right-of-way and backs directly into the roadway as this does.
Yeah, but, yeah, to share with staff, we have places where there is parking on city right-of-way, and that's what the traffic engineer referenced, the non-utility use agreement, which allows that. The difference here, this is state right-of-way, so the city will not be able to issue a non-utility use agreement for that parking on out right-of-way. It's going to kind of fall into somewhat of a gray area for ALDOT. If ALDOT's willing to go along with it being there, it's going to be an ALDOT position, not a City of Mobile position for the backing into the right-of-way.
Right, but I understood Mr. Atchison's question to be if there was any similar in this immediate area on Dauphin Island Parkway, and that's why I answered as I did.
Thank you.
Any more questions by commissioners? Thank you, sir. We'll take it up in deliberation.
Thank you.
Anyone else here to speak for or against this? Thank you. That closes our public hearing session. We'll now enter into deliberation. Item number 1 was withdrawn. Item number 2, north side of Greenlock Road, an 1-year extension recommended for approval. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposes? That extension has been granted. Holdovers. Item number 3, 3975 Demetropolis Road, recommended for approval. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. New subdivision applications. 59 Oklahoma Drive, recommended for approval. Is there a motion?
Move to approve based on staff recommendations.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Pass. Item number 5, 203 South Claiborne Street and 305 Civic Center Drive, recommended for approval. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Pass. Item number 6, 4658 Clearview Drive. It's recommended for approval. Is there a motion?
Move to approve based on staff recommendations.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Item number 7, Forest Hill subdivision on Moffett Road. It's recommended for approval. Is there a motion?
Move to approve based on staff recommendations.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposes? Pass. Item number 8, 990 Cody Road North, recommended for approval. Is there a motion?
I move to approve based on staff recommendations.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposes? Pass. Item number 9, 5157 Roswell Road South, which is recommended for approval. Is there a motion?
Move to approve based on staff recommendations.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposes? Pass. Item number 10, 3531 and 3535 Lipscomb Landing, recommended for holdover to the November 16th meeting. I'll make that motion.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item will be held over until November 16th meeting. Item number 11, south side of Arc Road, west of Alba Club Road, extending north to terminus of Charlotte Street. Recommended for approval. Is there a motion?
Move to approve based on staff recommendations.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Item number 12, 10950 Airport Boulevard. It's recommended for approval. Is there a motion?
I move to approve based on staff recommendations.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Pass. New planned unit applications. Item 6576 Airport Boulevard. Staff recommends approval. Is there a motion?
Move to approve based on staff recommendation, changing item number 1 to the 2 years from date of initial placement.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Pass. New group applications. 6401 Overlook Road. It's recommended for approval for both subdivision and zoning. We'll take it as one item.
Move to approve based on staff recommendations.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion?
Just to clarify, that is going to B1, correct? Okay.
Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Item number 15, 2001 Spring Hill Avenue, 137, 39, 49, Tuscaloosa. Is there a motion?
Move to hold to November the 16th meeting.
Second.
Second.
Motion to hold over till November 17th?
16th.
16th.
16? Yeah, 16.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposes? Item is held over till the November 16th meeting. Item number 16, 451 and 457 Dolphin Island Parkway. Is there a motion?
Move to hold till 11/16 meeting.
Second.
I had properly moved and seconded for holdover until November 16th meeting. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item will be held over until the November 16th meeting. And those are all our items. Is there any business, or old or new?
No, sir, not that I am aware of.
Okay. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
The photo book that was passed around, where did?
Hand it back to him, it's ours.
We need it in another month.
Yeah, we'll lose it.
No, you can have that. Thank you.
Here, Bill, thank you, Tim. Okay. Let me give it to her.